I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our ongoing combined series of Dave versus the MSM and Operation Freedom Briefing. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for networking this information to all those you know and love. Encourage them to join us at davejanda.com, where we have extra shows, content, guests, analysis, archives to all of our shows available for you 24/7. At a minimum, come by for our news ticker that's going 24/7 that our IT team has developed. It's a news ticker you're never going to see on any other platform. It gives you the information that the Syndicate absolutely despises because they want you misinformed, disinformed, and completely uninformed because it makes you an easier target. They also want you in fear. They want you on the couch. They want you paralyzed because it's easier to strip you of your freedoms and liberties if you're sitting on the couch. On our subscription side of the platform, I've gone into great detail in dissecting the latest syndicate strategy of chaos. The latest strategy of chaos, and it's one of their main operations that they implement. Because out of chaotic situations, they get more power control, more financial resources, and can control the narrative. And I think that's what Utah is all about. I've gone into great depth on the subscription side because there's information that can be discussed behind a paywall, if you will, that you cannot discuss on a radio show because of the deep state choke points at the FCC, that you cannot discuss on public-facing videos. I mean, I'm already shadow banned, suppressed, oppressed, censored, on you name it. It's ridiculous. Which is why our website, davejanda.com, has become so important for us to get the information to you. And again, the depth of information on that platform, I believe, and obviously I'm biased, but the information presented is based on the context I've developed over the last 37 years, not just in our government, but around the world, of contexts of people that are freedom fighters behind the scenes that have been fighting for decades. And they need an avenue to get that information out, and I just happen to be that avenue because of my friendship with them. You know, we hear about MAGA, Make America Great Again. Well, when you look at Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk was a really good guy. I believe inadvertently, he started Turning Point when he was 18, 19 years of age. Baby, essentially. Definitely a baby politically. He didn't have any big ties to big money, and where he grew up around the suburbs of Chicago, and didn't have any big political connections. But he grew Turning Point to a huge degree. I mean, enormous. I believe their operating budget is about $80 million. $80 million. And, I look at that and I go, wow, $80 million. Holy camole. That's a lot of money every year to use to cover your overhead and expenses and the like. It's for those of us that are suppressed and oppressed and censored and targeted in the independent media. Heck, I have a hard time getting $9 a month for the best content I believe in the world 24/7. 80 million. I think Charlie, as a young guy, had some people approach him who were very generous. But I think, unfortunately, some of those people had significant ties to nefarious organizations and individuals. And to make a long story short, I believe that in the last year of Charlie's life, he started to ask some very tough questions to some of those people behind the curtain. And actually a bit in front of the curtain. And as happens with that type of situation, he was undoubtedly told to back down. And at that point in his life, he felt that he had enough fame and fortune and contacts of people in high places that he was pretty well insulated. And he didn't back off. Good for him. And I believe a number of these individuals that had backed him saw him no longer as an asset, but a liability. And that's why Utah happened. And I believe some of these people that he innocently, they told him, hey, you're great, and which he was. You're great. You're a great speaker. You're so smart. You get the information out. You have a network. You're networking with the kids. This is good. It's all true. But unfortunately, some of those people were tied to some really bad entities. And it goes back to a video I did. It's only on our website. I could never put this up on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere. But it's on our website. It's called The Three Conversations. You should watch it. Because if you watch it, it will make everything in Utah, and it will make all of these chaotic events that we've seen in our lifetimes, it'll make it all add up. There are three conversations of big-time political figures who had conversations with this guy in 1988 and 1989. Oh, that's ancient history, Dave. Well, it is a long time ago, but it actually explains everything. Everything about what I believe happened in Utah and what I believe has happened in major chaotic events in my lifetime. A lot of it comes down to that operative word, leverage. The Syndicate's strategy of chaos really is focused on leverage. They can leverage you a lot of different ways. Bribery, blackmail, coercion, threats of violence. So right now, where we stand, we have, as far as the perpetrators of this horrific crime, one option is that this kid, 22-year-old kid, Tyler Robinson, we're told one option is that he was a lone wolf and had absolutely no ties to anybody. Okay. They expect us to believe the propaganda porridge they spilled out in November 1963 about Lee Harvey Oswald. So we might as well call this guy Tyler Harvey Oswald. The other option they try to push us is that this lone wolf, and I believe there is some truth to this, had some ties to a radicalized movement. Radicalized movement that was funded and supported through the globalists. I think there's some justifiable evidence behind that. and verifiable. There's also potential evidence that says that, and a theory that this lone wolf, Tyler, was used as a patsy in the Oswald fashion by intelligence agencies, plural. And then there are some folks out there saying this whole thing was staged and it was fake. I don't buy into that last one. I really don't. I don't. I think it was real. And it happened. But the question is, what is it? Who was it? And I think we have a little bit from column B, the lone wolf tied to a radicalized movement, along with this lone wolf, this patsy, if you will, tied to an intelligence operation. Can't go into detail specifically. I do that on the website. But ultimately, let's talk about what the goals of the perpetrators, and I believe the perpetrators in this was the globalist syndicate. I think their goals and objectives were multifactorial as it relates to the Utah event. One, it was their standard divide and conquer technique by a chaotic event. And they wanted to frame it in a left versus right axis. Now, when you go to that video on our homepage under special presentations and featured presentations, it's called The Three Conversations. The first conversation was from a political figure who was representing President Reagan at this meeting to a small number of us, that the left-right axis, we were told, was theater. That the real axis to look out for and to work on was the up-down axis, up being freedom, hence Operation Freedom, up being freedom and down being oppression. And that there were people within the government and within the private sector around the world, and not just the United States government, all governments, that were focused on the oppression side. They were paid. They were puppets of a syndicate. Yeah. So part of their goal and objectives was their standard op, which was divide and conquer. Let's blame it on some radical left person, and let's get the right all ginned up, and there will be violence. That's what we want. We want civil unrest. We want societal chaos. That was one of their top objectives, right? But as I mentioned in a previous video, that didn't happen, did it? We didn't have any burning buildings. We didn't have any riots. We didn't have any police officers or members of the general public killed, other than Charlie, or injured. No. We had prayer vigils. We had memorial services. Yeah. You see, that in and of itself made it a loss for the syndicate. Because they were looking for a George Floyd type event on steroids this time. And they didn't get it. No. They didn't get it. The question is, why didn't the riots happen? Because I believe the past 5 years has been an awakening. Many people that don't even want to admit it in public have realized that all of us have been played. Mm-hmm. All of us have been played into this divide and conquer. Frankly, I think COVID woke up billions of people around the world, tens of millions, right here in the good US of A, to that fact. Yeah. Another goal of theirs was to silence an awakening movement in the youth, of which Charlie Kirk was a prime time leader. the questions Charlie was asking that several of us on independent media platforms have been asking for a long time, for years, which is why we're suppressed and targeted and shadow banned and threatened and all this business. They couldn't have Charlie doing that on college campuses. No. Another objective was to send a message to all of the platforms they have ties with. The Syndicate has ties with. The controlled opposition platforms. And you know who they are. They're the ones that continue to get huge view counts, that aren't censored, that aren't targeted, that aren't thrown off platforms. Those are your controlled opposition platforms. And they wanted to send a message to them, hey, if we're going to do this to Charlie, we can do it to you. And finally, I believe they were using this event in Utah as a distraction cover for another major operation they have in the cards. And I believe that major operation is the financial takedown of the world, of which they've pre-positioned themselves. So they'll do just fine, the Syndicate. But tens of billions of people around the world will not. And that's fine with them, the Syndicate. Because they see all of us as, at least 90 to 95% of us, as baggage. Sad but true. But look what we're dealing with. The globalist syndicate is a conglomeration of psychopaths, narcissistic psychopaths. That's our adversary. Once you realize that, it makes figuring a lot of this other stuff out pretty easy. I recently had one of the top geopolitical experts in the world, Harley Schlanger, on our platform at davejanda.com. And Harley recently wrote an article about the strategy of tension, a globalist operation. And it's a fantastic article. And you can find it at laroucheorganization.com. But I want to read a couple things that Charlie wrote here. And in particular, he was looking at the chaos out of Utah. Despite numerous and unanswered questions about the perpetrator and the reasons for his action, the media has been featuring the most provocative statements to evoke violent reaction. Left versus right. Remember, right versus left. This is civil unrest, societal chaos. By predictably highlighting comments aimed at activating left-right profiles. Harley goes on. As this tension between the left and right is stoked, there are some who recognize this as replication of the strategy of tension which gripped Italy from the late 1960s until the murder of Prime Minister Aldo Moro in May of 1978. Deadly terrorist acts were committed by the left and right, which led to tough anti-terror crackdowns. The strategy of tension from Italy's is defined as a political policy that encourages violent struggle to create a climate of fear and insecurity, leading the public to seek security in a strong national security state. It involves deployment of state or non-state actors to promote violence and chaos, to manipulate public perception and public outcomes. Does it sound familiar to what happened in September of 2001? Does it? It should. It sure should. Harley goes on. Many suspected at the time that the authors of the Italian terror wave were British and American intelligence officers of MI6 and the CIA in particular, deploying terror assets operating under NATO's Operation Gladio. These terror networks included former Nazis and communists who were recruited after the war to be deployed to undermine any effort to end post-World War II division. They want division. And if you're going to end their division, whoa, they're going to do all kinds of crazy things, sinister things, to keep people at each other's throats so they can keep getting more power, more control, and more financial resources. And Harley concludes with this. For those who wish to honor Charlie Kirk, instead of using his murder to inspire a fight for the fake narratives of the establishment, his fight for freedom of speech would be a preferred battleground. Yeah. Make America talk again. Make America think again. When you watch Charlie's videos of him interacting with the students, the first thing was talk. I might disagree with you, but let's hear it. I'm giving you a microphone. Let's hear it, and then you can listen to what I have to say to counter. Talk. And as this talk would go on between Charlie and a student, and if you looked in the background of the other students, all of a sudden, you would start to see light bulbs go on. Think. Thinking. Make America talk again leads to make America think again. Think about it. Think about it. Our educational system, which was one of the finest in the world, has devolved over decades' time. Because what's taught in schools is a lot of regurgitation of propaganda. Not how to think, let alone analytically think, and how to apply it to other issues around the world. See, I was blessed with an education that was public-based education in fine schools. But I was also blessed with a mom who was a teacher and a great aunt who was a teacher and two aunts who were teachers. And what they drilled into this hard head was how to think, how to analytically think about issues at hand. To not accept the propagandized narrative pushed through the bought-off lamestream fake media, but to take information and gather more information and gather more information and put it all in front of you like a puzzle and how to think. And then to take your thoughts and talk about them. Not scream, not demonize, but to logically present your information to anyone willing to listen. See, and that's what Charlie was doing. And that's why they had to get rid of him. He was a very effective communicator. He was very effective at talking. He was very effective, and here's the critical part, of making people think. Harley goes on. His fight for freedom of speech would be preferred battleground. It can be used to expose the Anglo-American intelligence and corporate establishment for their responsibility for the millions of deaths resulting from their wars as they try to defend their predatory imperial order. The strategy of tension, it's called. The strategy of terror. It's the strategy of the globalist syndicate. There are many sides to this equation. There are many questions we all still have. But the key is not being fearful, not being paralyzed, not going back to the couch, because that is what the syndicate wants. But it's our obligation to every child in our country and the world, in every future generation, to keep talking. Keep talking peacefully, but to keep interacting. What's the first thing they did during COVID? Lockdowns. Don't talk. Just sit in your house, be fearful, consume our propaganda, which was bogus, all of it, but be fearful. You just watch your neighbor. Make sure they're minding their... Oh, if you see them cutting their lawn, you report them to the health department, right? Remember that? I'm not kidding. The commandant here in the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who sent COVID-positive patients to COVID-negative nursing homes and killed thousands in the process. She made it so that you weren't to go out and cut your grass. No. You weren't to go to a store to buy carpeting or paint. I'm not kidding. This was psychosis. And what was even crazier is how many people followed those dictatorial, totalitarian BS orders. Why? Because people weren't talking, because they were told to lock down. And they weren't thinking. And in a nutshell, folks, that is why they silenced Charlie Kirk. Single greatest testimonial you can give to Charlie and for all of us that are fighting for every person's freedom around the world is to talk. And I know sometimes when you talk, you're talking to people that don't want to listen, let alone they don't want to think. But plant those seeds to make people think. They may not do it right away. Eventually they will. You've experienced this already yourself. Because you bring some of the information we present, you bring it to your neighbor or your loved one, and they go, oh, that's conspiracy theory. I'm not even going to listen. And then all of a sudden, as time goes on, sometimes it can take years, they realize, hey, my neighbor talked to me about that 5 years ago. They were onto something, and I pushed them away. I got to think about this now. You just won. You just won. You just won freedom for not just that person, but for every kid in the world. The more we get people to talk peacefully, not screaming, because that's what the syndicate wants. The more people we can get to talk about stuff, issues, the more people we can get to think. And you know what that does? It ends this reign of chaos and terror incredibly quickly. So, time to get at it. Time to get at it. Talking and getting people to think. I see our role here as not spoon feeding you information, but giving you information that is food for thought. And then the goal is for you in this bucket brigade of truth, because thinking leads to accountability that leads to transparency, right? It's all linked. That's surely what the deep state doesn't want. Food for thought. Until next time, I thank you for joining me. We're available 24/7 at davejanda.com. Please join us. Become a part of our freedom family. It's 30 cents a day, $9 a month. Sign up month to month. It'll put you months, scratch that, years ahead of the curve. We'll provide you a banquet of food for thought to enrich your life, to support your freedom. And hopefully you'll then do the same to others. I thank you for joining me today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.